All right, so I kind of want to pick up a little thought, and then I want to move on because you sparred something in my head, and that is, what do you think? And maybe you haven't given this any thought, because it's where my brain went off to. What do you think will cause people to actually want to do that? I mean, there's going to be people.
You mean to bow and worship?
To bow and worship this guy. It is, and we're talking about a guy. Okay, so the Bible tells us he's, first off, he's going to be a ruler that is going to uproot 3 kingdoms. We get that because there's the 10 horns. But the one horn comes up and uproots 3 kingdoms and takes its place. And that horn speaks blasphemies against God. It's the same guy as this. Okay, and so because he's got 3 kingdoms where everybody else just has 1, he's ruling 3. It allows him to have domination because he's greater than all the other kingdoms at the time. Then we're told that there's going to be the building of a temple. And because he ends up having this head wound and raises back from it, he's going to appear to be God. There's going to be 2 guys at the same time that are going to be preaching, and nobody can touch them. But eventually, after 3.5 years, he's going to be able to kill them. And but in the process, one of them is going to be Elijah-like.
Okay, when you say he's going to be able to kill the 2 witnesses, because up until that time, no one has been allowed to even get close enough to them to do them any harm.
Right.
Because of the fire that can come out of their mouths and consume anyone.
Right. And he will be able to kill them. But up until that time, there's going to be this tit for tat that's going to be going on, because they're allowed to call down plagues. Well, he will do multiple signs and wonders from heaven. And one of them that he will do will be what Elijah of old did, and literally call down fire from heaven. And so that's going to kind of be his proof that I'm the real deal and these guys aren't. And then eventually he's going to be able to kill them. The whole world's going to celebrate over their death. And this is all going to happen in Jerusalem, because when it starts, he starts, I forget what chapter it is. We'll see if we can get that reference for you. By saying, measure the temple, but don't measure the outer court of the temple, because it belongs to the Gentiles and they'll trample it under feet. Well, the Gentiles...
That's in chapter 11, verse 1 and 2.
Okay, and so the Gentiles are just going to be running through Jerusalem, even through the outer court of the temple at the time. And so these guys are going to die and be killed by this one. And when they do, he's the whole world is going to celebrate, and they're going to attribute it to him, which will even give him more power. He's already called down fire from heaven. He's already evaded death and has come back from a mortal wound. And he's taken these 2 guys that could do all these. By the way, there's going to be a ton of miraculous things that people are going to see in the end time. A ton of it. It's going to be just absolutely, I don't want to use a positive word for it, magnificent, but it's going to be fantastic. The things that people are going to see with no explanation, and it's going to look like humans have authority over this. And that will be the thing that will allow him to walk into the temple and go, I am God, this is my throne. And then he's going to do something at the temple that is going to be, so first off, he's going to totally rewrite all the Jewish laws, because it says that he will totally change God's times. And so the things for like Passover and Feast of Tabernacles and the things that the Jewish people, he's going to rewrite all that.
Okay, time out just a minute.
Yeah.
You said he's going to be able to walk in and say, I am God. But we automatically know that until Jesus sets his feet on this earth for the second time, he's not God. I mean, in other words, the Antichrist is not God. So that's what also makes me wonder, even with the signs and the wonders, I I guess that's where it's going to, like it says, deceive even the very elect.
If it were possible,
Yeah.
and there will be some that will be possible because of where they are. We're watching that happen now. I guess the question would be, if they're deceivable, were they the elect? That will be, well, some people will.
Well, and that's
will
where
wonder.
people come up with, okay, well, you say they backslid, they lost their salvation. There are a lot of people who don't believe that you can lose your salvation once you have been forgiven. So the question is asked then of that, well, then were they even really saved in the first place?
And that's legitimate. The longer I've been in the ministry, that becomes a legitimate thing to ask that question. Did they really receive God's grace, or was it a thing in their heart where it was just lip service and I need enough, God, to just get by, which isn't what being born again really is. Being born is be born of a new spirit. And, praying the prayer of asking God to forgive me isn't some magical thing that gets you into heaven. A lot of people leave it at that. And we try to keep it as simple as that. But what being born again is that godly sorrow that realizes I was dead and Jesus has made me alive. He's forgiven me. He loves me. And all of a sudden there's just something that is born new within you that Paul writes, old things pass away and everything becomes new because I'm alive in Jesus Christ. That's what really born again really means. And I would say if somebody's really tasted of that.
Well, the scriptures say, oh, taste and
See that the Lord is good. That if you taste of that, how do you back away from it? Now, but there is apostasy, which is somebody who followed Jesus Christ but turned their back on. So, but it is by far more rare than this idea that people go, oh God, forgive me. Okay, I'm in. Oh, what does that mean? Nothing. I just go on and keep living my life the way I've lived my life. Were they really born of a new spirit? Just all they wanted was out of their trouble. So it's to that. And I think we're somewhat seeing it. Family, friends, I'm not going to mention any names, who we're in this time and age now, and they are so gullible and have swallowed everything so hook, line, and sinker that they're not even going back to church anymore. And their church has been open, and they can go and do all other kinds of things, but will not go back to the house of God to worship. And I ask myself, who's deceived them? Where is their love for the body of Christ? Where is their love for Jesus? And all of a sudden, they are now one of those people, well, I can worship anywhere. And
we can, don't get us wrong. I can worship God wherever I am.
And should.
Yes. But the reason why we do not forsake the assembling of ourselves together is because of the strength and the encouragement
of being in the body of Christ.
Correct.
So, and these people supposedly have been walking with the Lord for how long? And it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling that they have the freedom to run around and do other things, but now they realize that I don't have to go to church anymore. I'm free from that. And they do so with the deception. I had dead airspace there. I don't want to do that. With the deception of COVID-19, and that's where they are. So I'm painting this picture, and we have to put things in chronological order. So he walks into the temple. He sits on the throne of the temple. The Bible tells us he is able to alter the laws of God because he is now God, and he's able to alter the times of God, which is like Yom Kippur, which is for us Gentiles, Day of Atonement, that is supposed to be recognized, Passover that is supposed to be recognized because God said, do not forsake remembering what I have done for you here. Feast of Tabernacles is supposed to be recognized, which leads up to Passover. But he's able to alter it all because he is now God. So he can change God's times, which is the festivals that God has ordered, and he can change God's laws. He is God. These are the blasphemies. It says that he will blaspheme God, okay? Because he's God. So he can do all these things. And he'll do it from the temple. Then he's going to do something to the altar. It's called the desecration of the desolation of, terminology is escaping me. It's something of desolation. Some people think that he is going to, at minimum, he will not be a legitimate priest to offer sacrifice, but he will end up offering sacrifice on the altar in the temple. Some think it's going to even be worse than that. The very sacrifice that is never allowed on God's altar is a human sacrifice. Some think that it's even going to be even more dastardly than that, and that it's going to be the sacrifice of Baal, which is the sacrifice of children. Okay. We're not told any of that. But we are told that since he decrees that he is God, he is going to do that. Matthew chapter 24, that says that is the mark of time when that happens.
When he's able to sacrifice on the temple, or on the altar in the temple.
On the altar of the temple. Yeah. And that is what is going to start the mark of time. Or the mark of the end of time. And it'll be there. So up until that time, there's 3.5 years that will be happening, that when he first enters into the temple and declares that he is God, that he wants everybody to bow down. Now, I don't know if that desolation on the altar, desecration on the altar is going to happen at the beginning of that. It's going to happen somewhere in there, but that particular thing marks the beginning of the end of time. But when he walks, so is that going to be when he first walks into the temple? Is he just automatically, that's what he's going to do, declare it, boom, don't know? Or is he going to go into the temple and declare his throne and a certain amount of days? But we do know that when he enters that temple, that starts the time period of tribulation, because that is when he will demand people to bow down and worship him or his image, which is what we find in Daniel chapter 3. We have already something that has remarkably happened just like it. Daniel chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar sets up an image, everybody bows and worships the image, or you die. Well, this guy is going to do exactly the same thing. Bow down, worship the image, or you die. And
Well, that leads me into my next question that I was going to ask. Chapter 13 in Revelation, verse 8 says, all inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the book of life belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world.
I didn't hear a question in there. Yeah, that's a statement.
Okay, it says that the ones that have their name written in the book of life will not worship him.
That's not what it said.
It does say that.
It doesn't?
Yes, it does. It says all inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the book of life.
That's what it says.
Yeah, if their names have not been written in the book of life, those are the ones that are going to...
Yeah, but that's not what you said. Those are two different statements. You cannot make them synonymous, because that's not what it said. It said, if your name is not written in the book of life, you will worship the beast. That is what it said. It didn't say if your name's in that you won't. It didn't say that at all. It said if your name's not written in, you will worship the beast. There is no hope for you.
Okay.
There's hope for you, But where's that other verse where it talks about perseverance?
It's right here.
See,
The last half of verse 10 says, 9 says, he who has an ear, let him hear. 10, if anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints.
Those are the ones whose name is written in. So if you lose patience, if you do not, Jesus said, he who endures till the end.
I thought Paul said that. Let us run with patience the race that is set before us.
Yes, got me. Good one. I had checked that why my brain went that direction. So anyway, good catch.
But you're probably referring to Matthew 24.
I know I'm something out of Matthew 24.
Okay. Watch out that no one deceives. That's in verse 4. But here's probably what you're thinking of. Verse 13 in Matthew 24. But he who stands firm to the end will be saved.
Okay. So that's why I want to be careful and in saying that, it's if your name's written in the book of life that you're good. There are still choices that the Lamb's book of life. But if you're not written in the book of life, you have no hope. That is what he said.
Okay.
And there is a big distinction between having hope and salvation is yours if you endure.
Okay, here's where you're getting the word endure.
Yeah.
In the King James Version, in chapter Matthew 24, verse 13 says, but he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved.
Okay, I thought there was a Jesus reference there.
Okay.
But, and some people say, well, aren't you straining gnats and swallowing camels there? No, I want to be careful with what it says exactly. And in Revelation, exactly he is saying that if you're not in the Lamb's book of life,
you're going to be deceived.
You're going to be deceived.
Well, first of all,
because you have nothing no help to open to keep your eyes open.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, because you do not have the power of the Holy Spirit working through you.
And there are some who will say that the Holy Spirit has been withdrawn at this point in time. Some.
Okay, because
I don't necessarily.
If the saints are still here, if the salt of the earth is still here, then yes.
Yes.
Because God did say, my spirit will not always strive with man.
So now let's take that, because there are people who have written books and everything else about the other part, because tribulation is 7 years. This part is only 3.5. Well, that's half of it. Now I'm thinking that we talked about that there's going to be a great harvest. Some people seem to think that that's a revival. But an angel is told to take a sickle and go harvest the earth, which has more of a feeling of the rapture than it does of a great revival.
Yes, because Revelations 14, chapter 14, verse 14 says, I looked, and there before me was a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like a son of man, with a crown of gold on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. But so that means that that's not the actual second coming of Christ. That would allude maybe to the rapture, as you said, because he is seated on the throne. And the first swipe of the sickle takes out the good, because the second swipe of the sickle takes out the bad. And because they're the ones, and the reason why we know that they're the bad is because in verse 19, the angel swung his sickle on the earth and gathered its grapes and threw them into the great winepress of God's wrath. They were trampled in the winepress outside of the city, and the blood flowed out of the press, rising as high as a horse's bridles, for a distance of 1,600 stadia, which equals about 180 miles.
So we don't know how wide the river of blood is, but we do know that it's as deep as a horse's bridle, and we know it's 180 miles long.
Yes.
That's
And that's in the slang of, so, and that's called the harvest of the earth. So once you harvest,
yeah. And this goes in with something, I talked about this on Sunday, that when you read the book of Revelations, the book of Revelation isn't something that happens, okay, this happens, then this happens, and this. You can't read it in chronological order. What you have to do is you have to pick out similarities. We read about this and we read about this, and man, that sounds like this over here. Well, that's probably because it's related. And what you do is you get things in that story that are the same things, but on this side of it you get a different view, and on this side of it you get a different view. We just know that some of the facts are the same. That's how we know we're talking about the same thing. This has a lot of the same facts as the great battle at the end, okay, because it tells us then that there is going to be a river of blood that flows likewise, and it tells us how long, and I think we might find that it's going to be the same. It might not necessarily be the same, but would that not be if God's people comes back and does the warring on earth, and slays the inhabitants that are all the inhabitants that are evil? Does that not match the great harvest that would be here, and the death and destruction that the wrath is going to have? And it's Jesus pouring out his wrath as King of Kings before he sets his feet on the earth again. That's the great battle. We sometimes call it Armageddon. It's going to happen in the valley of Jezreel, I believe it is. And I will go and post some pictures so that people can see it. Something very famous happened there. There was a guy by the name of Naboth who had a vineyard in the valley of Jezreel. And there was a king who wanted it.
King Ahab.
And Ahab's palace overlooked the valley of Jezreel. And something very significant, if you sit on the mount of Jezreel where the king's palace was, if you look to the north, there's a ridge line of mountains, and on the other side of the mountains is Syria. Back in the day, Sennacherib, and that's where they came from. But it furthers the story of the great battle. Before the great battle happens, you have all of that. Jesus, well, I don't want to confuse it. But anyway, they meet, and it says that Israel's enemies will come out of the north.
Yes.
And he will come up out of the south. Well, Jerusalem is south. He'll start at Jerusalem, where he will reclaim his place on the throne in the temple, which means somebody's getting kicked out. And he will take, and it says all the saints will be with him, and all that's going to happen. And so you got this, and there's just going to be this giant clash that's going to happen in the valley of Jezreel. But that's where the harvesting of these souls, this is going to happen, and there's going to be great destruction there, and we call that the Battle of Armageddon.
Okay.
Because it's
then that's over in the Middle East.
Correct.
Where does that leave? This is going to open up a huge can of worms.
Probably something I can't answer, because nobody can. Where does that leave?
The America.
Where does that leave Asia and Africa?
Where does that leave anyone who does not live in that region?
This is the one thing that we know, and the only thing that I can apply, and that is that we are told that 1/3 of the earth's water, 1/3 of the earth's seas, so it separates salt water from fresh water, 1/3 of the earth's land
will be destroyed.
Becomes absolutely good for nothing.
Yes.
We don't, it doesn't say destroyed, but it's wormwood. There is the word that's given to it. It's good for nothing. Why? We don't know. But that will happen. We get the feeling, I get the feeling that that's where somewhere down that line, America and Asia is probably going to fall, maybe part of Africa. So North America, but it's only 1/3. So not all the Asian continent, because Middle East is part of the Asian continent. Maybe not all of Europe, because the Asian and European continents are connected. There's just a continental shelf, so that's how we separate In fact, some people may have learned about it by calling it Eurasia as a continent. But that's the region that exists and where all life is. But then God has always been just concerned with Jerusalem and that little tiny spot on the map. And that little tiny spot on the map has created so much heartache in this world. It's so much, garners so much attention. But that's because when it comes down to it, at the end of time, it all started over there, and it's all going to end over there. And that's God's. And so for some people, it might do them well. How would you feel about taking a summer vacation and go visiting Israel sometime?
You've always told me you had no desire.
I'm not asking about me. I know how I still feel. I'm asking about you.
You think I would travel that far without you?
I know. You're missing the question.
No, I have no desire.
Oh, okay. That's what I want to know.
Take me to old Europe and, you know, the
Mediterranean.
Oh, I'd love to go see the Mediterranean.
But that's because it has great weather.
And I'd love to see where the old world baking is done.
Yeah, that's that.
So, we don't have time right now, so.
Hi, everybody. I want to thank you for joining us on this edition of Where the Rubber Meets the Road. We're going to stop the discussion now, and we're going to bring it back a little bit later. So we want to invite you to come back and finish this discussion on where we are right now on Where the Rubber Meets the Road. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.